Chinatown was like the Wild Wild West. A lot of shootings, a lot of gang activity. They'll do a hit anyway. They don't care. You could be right next to the prison. Everyone's afraid of the gangs back then. During that era, there was about maybe 38 cold cases, homicide. If you ask me to go kill somebody for you, consider taking care of.
Michael Moy is a former Chinese-American gangster from New York City's infamous Chinatown neighborhood. He was a made man in the Fuk Ching Syndicate, one of the most powerful Chinese gangs in America at the time. Mike breaks down exactly how Chinese-American gangs operate, from gambling dens to extortion to prostitution and China white heroin trafficking. Mike lived it all by the age of 24 and then left the game without so much as a parking ticket. He then became, get this, a New York City cop and worked the force for 25 years before finally retiring so he could tell his story. His book, Bad to Blue, is available on Amazon, and his YouTube channel, Chinatown Gang Stories, contains fascinating insider accounts of how he survived the New York City gang wars of the 1980s and 90s, the bloodiest era in the history of Asian gangs in America. And for a bonus episode with Mike, you know what to do. Hit that Patreon, patreon.com/TheConnectShow. This is a rare one, folks, and it's a gem. Enjoy this episode with Mike Moy right here on The Connect with Johnny Mitchell.
I served as a cop in the 6th precinct, and it covers Brooklyn's Chinatown. The NYPD, they had the power to do anything they want. We have intel, we have informants out there. They did a drug bust in Chinatown that was valued over $1 billion.
Did you grow up in an apartment this size, or was it smaller?
Oh, let me see. Okay, I would say the living room was about half, a little bit bigger than, about 3/4 of this size. No, maybe smaller. I would say half. Yeah, you know what? The living room was half.
Wow.
Half of this. And it's a small room, but it was a railroad apartment.
Yeah.
You know what a railroad apartment is?
Apartment is you have to walk through the bedroom to get
the bedroom.
Yeah. Explain what a railroad, just for people that don't know.
A railroad apartment is one long hallway.
Yeah.
And you have the bedrooms either on the right side or left side. But the apartment that I lived in, it was on the right side as I'm walking down the hallway. So, and there was 3 rooms, but no doors. It's just 3 rooms.
And you have to pass through the bathroom oftentimes to get to a bedroom.
In the apartment in those days, the bathtub was in the kitchen area.
Right.
My great-grandmother lived on Pell Street. I believe it was 6 Pell Street.
Yeah.
Or maybe 10 Pell Street. I don't know if I see it because I used to go there as a kid, and the bathtub was actually right there, smack in the middle of the kitchen. And they would just put a, what do you call it? A piece of wood over it and use that as like a cutting board, and where you place all your dishes. And when you take a bath, you take that board out.
You take it off.
Yeah. And you know what? They have some
prison.
pictures. They have some pictures on the internet of those old apartments in Chinatown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're probably still there, a lot of them.
Oh, nah. They took it out. I guess they renovated it, you know.
Surely they renovated it, but I mean, those places now rent for probably $4,000 a month.
Probably, more, maybe.
It's just the hippest place.
Exactly.
But there's still Chinese down there. There's still the last throes of that generation, your generation, to come from communist China. I think,
Under rent control, probably.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. They're like the Puerto Ricans on the Lower East Side. Like the only thing keeping them there is the rent control that's been passed on from like the 70s.
Not too many Chinese left in New York City, Chinatown, Manhattan.
Oh, it's a shame.
They're moving out.
Yeah.
There's a lot in Flushing and 8th Avenue in Brooklyn.
Right.
Brooklyn and Queens.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So your generation, you were born here?
Yes, I was born in New York City.
And then who came over? Was it your grandparents or your parents?
My grandparents came over with my grandmother came over with my mom in 1966.
Okay.
My father came over in 1946.
Oh, so your father came over here early?
Yes, when he was 7 years old.
Okay. So they're escaping.
He was what's known as a paper son.
And why?
Do you know what a paper son is?
No.
Look it up. Paper son is when they give the child to another family so they can come over to the U.S.
Wow.
That's what a paper son is.
How did your parents grow up in China? Were they poor?
Very, very poor. My mother's side of the family, they weren't poor. They grew up poor, but eventually they were able to make money because my grandmother's, my grandmother's grandfather was in the U.S. back in those days when they had the queue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was living on Mott Street back in those days, and he was sending money back home to China to her.
Right.
And she was able to build a business with that money. In the beginning, they were poor.
Yeah.
But then, I don't want to go into politics about what happened during the Mao Zedong.
Yeah, well, but that's important though, because the Great Leap Forward and the 5-year programs, all of China, millions, tens of millions of people were starving to death in China under his programs, and that was the wave, the 1960s wave, when your mother and your grandparents finally came over here.
Yes.
And it's funny now because we associate Chinese gangs and Chinese criminals with these very affluent kind of fentanyl traffickers and money launderers. And we assume Chinese in America are like these rich, affluent people, but you're from the previous generation before it opened up.
During that generation, it was the poor Chinese who came over to the U.S. You're talking about the poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
They had nothing to lose. They would take on debt just to come to the U.S.
Yeah.
But now it's different. Now when you see Chinese people come over, they're the ones that have money.
Yeah.
Because you have to have money in order to be able to leave China.
Right. Right.
So there's a different era now.
Yeah. So was the 60s, was when your mom came over, 66, was that a big migration of Chinese to New York?
During that time, yes. Yes, during that time. My father came in the 1940s, and it wasn't easy to get to the U.S. unless you come over as a paper son.
What do you do? Do you take a ship over?
Or unless you have family here.
Right. How do you get over in the 1940s?
He came by ship. It's in my book. If you read the book.
That's insane.
Bad to Blue. He came by ship.
I mean, how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
And so you were born in Chinatown, New York City.
I was born in Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn. Yeah, then I lived in New York City's Chinatown, 26 East Broadway, a 6-story building.
And what kind of kid were you? I mean, you seem like a nice guy. What, did you grow up
I was very
surrounded
quiet.
by gangsters?
No, I was very quiet and reserved. I usually keep to myself. I'm not like, I wasn't like a troublemaker until probably like when I went to public school. I would say sometime around the 5th grade, that's when I started. Maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, that's when I started acting out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Chinese from Chinatown, you're surrounded by all working class kids from working class families. And so it's hard.
If you're talking
There's
about
not a lot of money.
Yeah, if you're talking about Chinatown in the 70s, they all speak Chinese. You don't come across anyone who speaks English in Chinatown back in the 70s when I was growing up there. It's very rare that you come across someone who speaks English. And I didn't speak any English, not even a word of English, until I went to public school and I was thrown into kindergarten not knowing any English at all. You can live in Chinatown and live your whole life in Chinatown and you don't need to know how to speak English, and you can survive in Chinatown. Right. That's why a lot of people get stuck in Chinatown.
Yeah. I mean, you have a pretty thick Chinese accent,
Exactly,
but you were born in America.
I was born in the U.S., in America, in New York, but I have an accent because of all the people I was hanging out with, especially the gang members. They all speak Chinese, most of them. And even like those Cambodian, the Vietnamese gang members, the Laotian gang members, they speak Cantonese.
Right.
Because if you didn't speak Cantonese back then, you didn't fit into the gang. It's so different. The East Coast Asian gangs and the West Coast Asian gangs.
Right.
It's very different.
Is our West Coast Asian gangs, is that Mandarin Chinese?
The West Coast, the way I see how the West Coast Asian gangs are is they're more, I would say, Americanized. Because maybe it's because the first wave of immigration, many of the Chinese people, they landed in the West Coast first.
Right.
And then eventually they worked their way to the East Coast.
Right.
You know, so they've
been here longer.
They've been here longer. And like if you see the West Coast Asian gangs, eventually they adapt to the hip hop culture.
Yeah.
But in the East Coast, it wasn't like that. It was more like the triad culture.
Right.
You know, so I can say that me as an ABC, American-born Chinese, I didn't fit into the Asian gangs, the Chinatown gangs. I didn't fit in if I did not speak Chinese. I'll be like seen like an outsider. Right. You know, like, okay, you're just an associate.
Right.
You're not in the inner circle.
Right.
So that's why a lot of the Chinatown gangs in New York City, they had branched out into factions called ABC Flying Dragons, or like the Ghost Shadows have their ABC faction, which is very small, you know, because they didn't feel like they fit in.
Right, right. So in the 70s, when you're coming up as a kid, there's already Chinese gang presence in Chinatown.
A heavy gang presence.
Yeah.
A lot of the people who lived in the area, the residents, they try to like move their kids out because they don't want the kids to get caught up in the gangs. Even as a kid, I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I would hear my relatives like just huddling around in the living room, whispering, talking about the gangs, how they don't want my uncles to get caught up in it, or their relatives, you know, cousins or whoever. Wow. And even that was the grip that the gangs had. They had a misconception that the gangs were going to force you to go in, force you to join. So a lot of the residents of Chinatown, the parents, were worried that the kids would get forced to join. So many of them who had the means to move out, moved out of Chinatown. But those who got stuck in Chinatown, they were worried every day for their kids.
Yeah. Wow, that's really insane.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because you have all of these Chinese people who don't speak English, don't feel comfortable going to the cops, and there's a lot of money here.
A lot of money. The cops didn't care about the Chinese back in those days.
No.
And especially the Chinese gang members, let them kill each other.
Right. So a big thing people probably know, if you know anything about Chinese culture, you guys love to gamble. That was one of the biggest rackets back then. Tell us about the gambling houses in Chinatown.
Gambling houses are making a lot of money. A lot of money. I mean, you go to the casino now, you see a lot of Chinese people gambling, right?
That's all you see there.
So just imagine, back then, they didn't have all these casinos. So where do they gamble? In Chinatown. So all the money flowed into the gambling houses. And they didn't have the means to drive to Atlantic City back then. In Atlantic City, the casinos, it wasn't 24 hours.
Right.
Back in those days.
Right. And what do the Chinese like to play? What game specifically? Is it poker? Is it baccarat?
Back then, they like to play tiles, the pai gow tiles. Now, if you're talking about nowadays, they like to play baccarat.
But what were the gambling houses specifically serving the Chinese market in Chinatown back then?
What was that?
What game specifically? What was the biggest game amongst the illegal gambling parlors in Chinatown back then?
The biggest games back then, pai gow, mahjong, and 13-card poker. Those were the biggest games back in Chinatown in those days. And we're talking about the 70s into the 80s, up until like the early 90s. Then it became baccarat, and then you have all these electronic machines. Like the Italians just have the Joker Poker.
Right.
The Chinese have their version of their games.
And so the gangs would control these gambling houses. I assume they can be anywhere, right? Above restaurants, in people's apartments. Like, tell us where they would host these games.
Where would they host these games? They would host anywhere. They'll host in the basement of a storefront, or in the back room of a factory. It could be anywhere. Or they could just rent a high-rise condo, like in Flushing. That's what my Dilo had. That was back in probably the early 90s. Yeah, he rented a place in a high-rise condo. Expensive condo, just to cater to the high-end clienteles.
Yeah.
And then for the lower-end clienteles, he had gambling houses on Bowery, Christie Street. Yeah. In the storefront in the back. And then I had mine on Avenue U and in the basement of a storefront. And we also did gambling in my pool hall. I had a pool hall on Flatbush and Nostrand Avenue back in those days. It was a 6,000 square foot pool hall, and I had 19 tables and a table tennis table. So I had 20 tables, and in the back room, we used it for gambling. Wow. And I put the Joker Poker machines on the side, and I had a little game room in the front. Yeah. So there's always places where you could set up a gambling house. I mean, Chinese people, their form of entertainment back then was gambling. Because there's no other form of entertainment for them besides gambling and going to see a movie in Chinatown. That's why back then there was so many movie theaters in Chinatown. Many movie theaters playing the Shaw Brother movies from Hong Kong.
Wow, yeah.
And that was their form of entertainment, because what else are they going to do? If they don't speak English, you're not going to catch them to see a Broadway show. You're not going to catch them on a Disney cruise.
Right.
What other form of entertainment do they have besides going to watch a movie and gambling? Right. And then later on, eventually it came out with the VCR tapes, and that was the end of the movie theaters then.
Right.
And then now they all stay home and watch the movies from the Hong Kong industry, the TVB movies and whatever movies that they get. And that's how this guy Vincent Zhu got his hands into that business, and he was making a lot of money with that from the West Coast, and he came down here and tried to muscle in on the East Coast, and that story you can get from Peter Chin, Dilo the Ghost Shadows.
And that's
there's a lot of money involved with those VCR tapes.
And is that bootleg tapes?
Bootleg tapes.
Okay, can you explain just a little bit for people who don't know what a bootleg tape is?
They would copy these soap operas from Hong Kong, and then they'll open up a store and they'll rent it out or they'll sell it. And it's 100% profit because you're copying it.
Of course.
So what Vincent Zhu did was he got the rights to it, made a deal, whatever, got the rights, and then he basically was the enforcer. Okay, nobody's gonna open up in this area because he's got his name attached to it. I mean, look it up, Vincent Zhu.
And it seems like from the outside, when you hear these stories, you're like, oh, this is petty cash.
Petty cash.
But it's not.
No, I was making a lot. I was doing bootleg video myself back in the 90s, selling Shaw Brother movies, right? And I hooked up with a West Indian guy, black guy, Diamond, and he was making money hand over fist. I sent him over in the business.
Okay, explain how much money you can make in bootleg videos. How does the whole business work?
All right, so
A to Z.
All right, we started out small because Flatbush Avenue was a big black community. West Indian people, they love Shaw Brother martial arts movies from the 70s. Remember those days?
Yeah.
And okay, so what I did was I already had the store across the street from my pool hall, and it was a collectible store. So I basically gave him a spot like the size of this table to sell the bootleg movies. So we set up. The setup was like this. So we bought like maybe 10 VCRs, a couple hundred VCR tapes, and we went next door to the print shop, and we copied the covers in color, and it may look like a regular VCR tape back in those days. You know, it looked really, really nice, the packaging and everything, with the box and everything. And we start selling those tapes. Back then, how much was it? I forgot how much those tapes were, because we use stolen credit cards to buy anyway. So I don't know how much it was, but it was 100% profit for us. So he had this connection with people who worked in Radio Shack to swipe the cards, and I got the cards, and we got like 10 VCRs, a couple hundred tapes, copied it, and we were selling it for $10 a pop. Yeah. So it was like, you're making more than drug money.
Yeah, you're printing money.
Yeah. So basically, it's all profit. And he was making a lot of money. And what I got from him was, okay, I give you this little booth right here, and you're going to pay me the rent and pay me back my investment, which is whatever it costs for the year. That would be 100% profit for me. And I get a little cut of it. Wow. And he was making a lot of money. And so I helped him in that sense, where we made money together, and we move on to other things. And he had somebody over there working for him, and we moved on to other things.
Okay.
And eventually we opened the pool hall right across the street.
Yeah.
And I named it after him, Diamond. One day you gotta get an interview with Diamond.
Okay.
He's very interesting.
Now, there was extortion, in these ethnic enclaves, like the Italian neighborhoods and like the Chinese neighborhoods. There's always people taking protection money from businesses. Was that going on in the 70s, or did that come about later? Can you tell us about that?
The extortions started in the 70s. I was a kid back then, but it started in the 70s. Yeah.
Was it common for businesses to understand that, this is what you do? You pay the local, whoever controls this block, we pay them a certain amount of money every week?
It was basically common knowledge back then. You open a store, you're going to pay somebody. That's it. You just got to pay. And it was just common knowledge to all the store owners, because if you're going to open a store, you're going to need to go through the Tongs, the organization who's going to help you. You got to have connections to open whatever stores. You just don't like, oh, you know what? You come to the U.S., you don't speak any English, and you're going to open up a store? No, it don't work like that in that community. Maybe now you can, because people who's coming here now into this country, they may have relatives who speak English, who's able to speak to a real estate agent, get them a storefront, and navigate through the whole process. But back then, you come to the U.S., who do you have? There was like the first generation here, and then the second generation, and who do you have? You don't have anybody to help you out except the Tong Association, right? The people you know. And before you even come here, they already know you're coming, because, the people who were smuggled here, like my uncle, he opened the liquor store when he got here, the Lemon liquor store on Bowery Street. Yeah, that was way, way back then. And he got smuggled into this country, and he came by boat, and the boat actually capsized in the East River. And already there were people from the Tong Association waiting for that boat to arrive. Wow. And they plucked them out of the water. Wow. And saved them. There was a whole bunch of people that plucked out from the East River. Wow. So
and who can
they already have everything all lined up before you even come to the U.S. And when you're gonna come to the U.S. and how you're gonna get here, they already have everything lined up. Just like the Snakeheads. Later on, it became more, streamlined. With Sister Ping.
Can you tell us about the Tong Association? Is that a legitimate organization, or do they also have illegal aspects to them?
Well, the Tongs, if you go way back into like the early 1900s, with late 1800s with the Tong Wars, they were gangsters, right? They were gangsters. But then eventually, they try to like present themselves as a legitimate entity. So who are these Tong members? They're like the elderly or the elders of the community, the respectable citizens, the residents of the community, people who are business owners, people who's been here longer, right? Maybe some of them are able to speak English. So they're able to help the newer immigrants coming over to the U.S. So they try to present themselves as, eventually they shied away from the criminal aspects of the organization, what they had before, like doing what the gang members used to do, like fighting. But money always draw them in to do illegal things. I wouldn't say all the Tong members are criminals, but then you have the people on the board maybe, or maybe the leader of a Tong association may get involved with the criminal elements, and that's what gave them a bad name later on, because now these Tong associations, they're the ones that's linked to the politicians, the police department, so they're like the bridge to them. So the gangs use them just like how they use the gangs. Right. So they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You know, but they don't have that much control over the gangs like how the media portrays, how the movie portray them. You know, is they need the gangs.
Right. Why do they need the gangs?
Gangs can just, for example, like the online association. They had the Black Eagles and the White Eagles, right, as the enforcer. And when the Ghost Shadows muscled in on Ma Street, they had no choice but to take on the Ghost Shadows. You know, so it's just, they work hand in hand together.
Today's episode is sponsored by MANDO, the world's #1 whole body deodorant. You guys are fans of the show. You know MANDO by now. You know what whole body deodorant is, I hope. It's deodorant that goes all over your body. You can put it on the bottoms of your feet, your grundle, hopefully, and of course your armpits if you're kind of a traditional guy like me. MANDO comes in a bunch of great scents, and this summer they are rolling out a revolutionary new product, the Sweat Control Solid Stick. It comes with the amazing odor control that you're used to with MANDO, plus extra strength sweat control. And trust me, I need that because I'm living in Austin, Texas now, and it's about 95 degrees at 7 a.m. So I am a sweaty, filthy, stinky kid for most of the day. Thank God I have MANDO. The Sweat Control Solid Stick is twice as powerful and better at controlling sweat than the leading brands. It controls both sweat and odor for up to 72 hours. It doesn't just mask odor, it prevents it. And check it out, I recommend getting the Sweat Control Solid Stick with a MANDO starter pack, which is perfect for new customers. The MANDO starter pack comes with a solid stick deodorant, a cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. And check it out, as a special offer to new listeners, MANDO is offering 20% off of all products site-wide when you use the promo code Mitchell. That's 2 L's at the end of Mitchell. That's shopmando.com, promo code Mitchell, to get 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Use that promo code Mitchell. Tell them we sent you. Go support them because they support us. Shop Mando. Do it up, folks.
And when you're opening a new business, and what do the Tongs have to do with it? Do they, I assume they get you a business license and they find you a real estate agent?
Well,
and how do the gangs fit into that piece of the puzzle?
If you're a new immigrant and you come into the U.S. and you landed in New York City's Chinatown, and now you want to open a business, right? You got to have some connections. Of course, you're going to be tied to a Tong association. Once you come to the U.S., you're going to be tied to a Tong association, and you're going to pay your dues. It's like paying union dues. So every week, every month, you pay your dues, and they know where you work. They know everything you do. They know your family. It's all tied to what village you came from, you know, what your last name is.
Right.
And now you want to open a business, and you want to borrow money. You can't go to the bank and borrow money. You know, the bank's going to like, who are you?
Yeah, right.
You know, but you could borrow money from the Tongs. They'll be able to lend you money. Okay, how much you need? Okay. How you gonna pay this back? Oh, your family's here. So they know your family. They know where you're from. They know you're not going anywhere. Right. So they'll lend you the money for you to open the business. Now, if the business fails, everybody is gonna have to pitch in to pay that loan back. Mm-hmm. And that's why some of these ghost shadows, I mean, like Peter Chin, he was loaning money out at 10%, right? Whereas the Italians were getting 2%. Right. And he never had a bad loan, right? Because the fear was there, you know, that if you don't pay back, what's going to happen? You're going to leave Chinatown? Where are you going to go? There's only a couple of Chinatowns in the whole entire United States back then. Right. Where are you going to hide? Yeah. You know, and your family's here. They're just going to pick up and go. They're going to have to come up with that money no matter what. They could be the most degenerate gambler and lose all the money, but the family's going to have to pay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, so
they're essentially like now, a more sophisticated loan shark. Yes.
Now, as far as getting a store, now you want to open a store, they provide you the money. Now you open, they provide you with the location. They know who's leaving, who's coming in. They know there's like a real estate agent. They know, you know, which business is doing well, which is going out, where the stores are available for rent. Yeah. So now you're able to open the store. So you already paid the Tongs, their red envelope, okay? And you're part of that Tong association, right? And then now the gangs come in, right? Now you open a store, now the gangs come in. Now here's the thing. You open a restaurant and you're doing very well. And if I'm a gang member and I'm going to lead a gang member, I send my underlings, like the associates. You go collect, and that money is going to carry you, feed you, whatever. You're at the low bottom of the totem pole. Those are the gang members who are collecting the extortion money from those type of stores, like a restaurant or a mom and pop store. But it's not like how the movie portrays it. Like, you're going to put them out of business? No. If you're a restaurant making tens of thousands of dollars a week, and guess what? Those restaurants were making that kind of money back in those days. They probably make more money back then than now. Look at the restaurants in Chinatown now, right? It's desolate. They close at, I can't even get an order of beef chow fun, right? At 7:45, 7:50 p.m. I try to get an order of beef chow fun in Chinatown, in Brooklyn. I can't even do it because they close at 8. The kitchen already closed already. Right. Back then, in New York City, Chinatown, 24 hours. You have to wait online to get food or a table at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
You know, that was the energy back then. Right. The vibe in Chinatown.
And is it because there were so many Chinese people and so many people that wanted authentic Chinese food?
I guess so many Chinese people condensed into one place. Right. And then you also have tourists and now the Chinese people, they branch out. They'll live in Jersey. They'll live in Staten Island. So it's not.
So if you're one of these restaurants
concentrated into one place.
So if you're one of these restaurants, you can pay a $200 a week, whatever, extortion fee to a gang to make sure that your store is safe.
Sort of like that, right? So you're a gang member. You're a 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid. You go in there. You identify who you are. You know, hey, you're with the Ghost Shadows. You're here to collect some money, extortion, whatever. You're the owner of the restaurant, okay? You toss them 100, 200, whatever, okay? That's it. You're just basically feeding these kids. Let them eat for free or whatever. Every now and then, they'll sign the bill with their name, with their gang name. You know, for example, like GS, okay? And then the Dailo will pick up the tab. You know, but Dailo's not gonna stiff the owner. He'll pick up the tab. Actually, my Dailo, like every time we sign the bill, he has his own rackets. He's making money. He'll pick up the tab. Right? So, like, let's say Chinese New Year, we'll go there. We'll give the restaurant owner oranges, some tangerine plant, and then they'll give us money. They'll give us a red envelope. We're not putting them out of business. We're not putting them out of business. It's just breadcrumbs for them.
Right. Now, how do you make sure that multiple people aren't collecting from the same business, from different gangs?
The gangs are based on territory.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on Mott Street, Bayard Street, Elizabeth Street, that's the ghost shadow territory. Right. You're on Doyer Street, Powell Street, and now you're entering Flying Dragons territory.
Right.
So they know. Yeah. And plus, back in those days, which they don't have anymore, when you go into the restaurant, they have a certificate hanging on the wall. Hip Sing Tong Association or the On Leong Tong Association. Right next to all the other business certificate like the tax ID and all that. They hang it there. It's like a plaque. Wow. You know?
Wow.
You wouldn't know unless you look for it.
So different street gangs were associated with different Tong associations.
Yes.
Wow.
Now you got the Flying Dragons associated with the Hip Sing Association. And you have the Ghost Shadow associated with the On Leong Association. And the Dong On gang on East Broadway and Division Street, they're associated with the Dong On Association. The Fuk Ching is associated with the Fukian Association. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So these Tong organizations, even though they tried to go legitimate, they still had very real ties to street gangs. Did the street gangs pay the Tongs? Did they pay a percentage of what they made from illegal rackets to the Tongs?
No, the Tongs get their cut and the gangs get their cut. For example, you have a gambling house.
Right.
The Tongs, you have connection to the Tongs to open the gambling house. Right. So you already paid your fees to the Tongs. Mm. And sometimes you may have a Tong member open the gambling house or a friend of the Tong board member or whoever open the gambling house. You have to pay the Tong. Right. And then after that, you have to pay a cut to the gangs. So when you pay usually the Tong gets more money. Mm-hmm. They're basically setting everything up.
Right.
And then the gangs get less. For example, like the Ghost Shadows. At that time in the 70s, each gambling house was paying $10,000 a week to the Ghost Shadows. Wow. And that's a week. And there was about a dozen gambling house at that time.
120,000 a week.
Wow. Over 100,000 a week in cash. And that's just to the Ghost Shadow.
Right.
Okay. And then of course the Tongs, they get more. Yeah. So whatever they get, I don't know, but that's what the Ghost Shadows get, just to protect the establishment.
Right.
Now, people think like, okay, now if Ghost Shadow's protecting this gambling house, does that mean you have an actual Ghost Shadow member there carrying a gun, standing at the door, protecting it? No, you're just gonna have an old man over there, letting people in, buzz people in or whatever. They're protecting it by name.
Yeah.
It's just like if you have a nightclub or a bar in Bay Ridge or Bensonhurst, and you got the Gambino, and Gambino crime family has a stake in that. Mm-hmm. Does that mean you got a Gambino captain or associate standing there with a gun protecting the place? Mm-hmm. Who's going to rob the place? Yeah. They don't need to be there.
Right.
But then sometimes they'll be there. Like sometimes, they'll be there hanging out.
So when things go wrong,
they
what
know
happens?
Who to look for, because there's only a small minority of criminals out there that's doing all the dirty work. Mm-hmm. You can have 80 gang members. It's just a handful of people doing the dirty work.
Yeah.
And they'll find out who it is. Mm-hmm. They'll find out.
So with that, like the Italians, for instance, we obviously know that those organizations are murderous. If they need to, they can firebomb your store. They can beat you up. They can make you disappear. Did the Chinese gangs, the enforcers, when things did go wrong, did they have the ability to take it there?
Of course, but they're very selective. If the Tong Association wants one of the gang members to do a hit, it's really up to the gang member. It's really up to the gang member if they're going to take on that job or not. Yeah. The Tongs don't have that kind of power over the gangs like people think.
But Tongs would order a hit like that, or at least
many times.
Request one.
Many times. Wow. Just if you read the book In the Ghost Shadows by Peter Chin, he speaks about some of the hits that the Tongs ordered. Okay. And just imagine how many hits are out there. Let me take you back to the 70s and 80s. And up until the early 90s, Chinatown was like the Wild Wild West. A lot of shootings, a lot of gang activity. Someone your age is not going to know that these things happen in Chinatown. If you go into the newspapers archives and just look up some of those streets where there were shootings with the Chinatown gangs on Mott Street, East Broadway, plenty of shootings in the movie theaters, all right? Then you're just going to get a small glimpse of what went on in Chinatown back then. A young kid nowadays, is like, no, what gangs? There's no Chinese gangs. Yeah, you're right. We're living in a different era now, right? There is no more Ghost Shadows, no Flying Dragons, and Dongwon Gang. No, the Tong associations all went legit. They're like senior centers now.
Right.
For these elderlies to play mahjong.
Right.
Right. Because the feds cracked down on them not only once, but twice. When they made that sweep in 84, and then later on around 92, that was it. That was the nail in the coffin for these gangs. It's like you're a kid. You're playing under the table and you bump your head once. You learn your lesson. Maybe you might bump your head again a second time. But you'd be an idiot if you're still going to carry on the Ghost Shadow name after the feds hit you twice. After that, it was over. For the Flying Dragons, Ghost Shadows, it's done.
Well, let's talk about before that happened. Tell us about the law enforcement did with these gambling houses, the prostitution that was going on, massage parlors and things like that. Did the NYPD have any ability to crack down on that stuff? Would they ever raid a place, anything like that?
Of course. The NYPD, they had the power to do anything they want. That's where the power is in the NYPD. If they don't want you there, it's not going to be there. I'll tell you that right now. Okay. Look at Mun Bun Lee, the unofficial mayor of Chinatown. The Ghost Shadows put a hit on him, right? Because he was talking to the reporters too much negative things about the gangs. They stabbed him. He didn't die. He was friends with the CO, commanding officer of the 5th Precinct at that time. He flew back from vacation just for him. After that, he had the cops shut down all the gambling houses in Chinatown, except for Uncle Seven's gambling house. All right? Every gambling house was shut down for 1 year. Wow. You know how much money they lost, the Ghost Shadows, during that 1 year?
Multi-millions.
Yeah. They had to move the gambling house outside of Chinatown.
So the cops knew what was going on, always.
The cops always know what's going on. We're the NYPD. How are we not going to know what's going on? We have intel. We have informants out there. All right? If they allow you to exist.
So are these cops that allow it, are they getting paid off?
What do you think? It's public information. Look up John Gore, NYPD. Right?
Tell us about him.
Him and another detective. They work in Vice. They were getting tipped off. And made it bad for me because when I became a cop, I was stereotyped. There wasn't too many Asian cops back then. Right. When I came on the job. And when I was in police academy, that was around the time that he made the papers. And everyone see me as, a corrupt cop. And eventually, know that movie, The Corruptor, with Chow Yun-fat? they nicknamed me the Corruptor, some of the cops. It's just, for fun, but it's, that's the way it is. It was like probably when I came on the job, probably about 500 Asians on the job back then. And out of 500, now Asians, which include, which includes not only Chinese, but you can include the Pakistani, the Korean, Japanese, and I believe there was only like maybe about 24 who speaks the language, because most of them were ABC, American-born Chinese, who didn't speak Chinese fluently.
Okay, so heroin and drugs that came in later. I know that just from the show that people used to get a lot of heroin, a lot of Puerto Rican drug dealers and guys from the Bronx and Harlem. A lot of their connects came out of Chinatown. There was China White being moved through the associations back then. Could you go into that a little bit?
Okay, let's go back to the late 1980s in New York City's Chinatown. A lot of heroin was coming in, a lot. It was available, and even I was offered bricks of heroin. They were smuggling in, and if you read the papers, they did a drug bust in Chinatown that was valued over $1 billion. And that's a lot of money. Wow. Even today, you don't get that kind of bust. So just imagine that kind of money flowing around Chinatown in that few block radius. Everyone was flushed with money, from the cab drivers to the waiters to the store owners, gang members. So each gang had their stake in how many bricks they get. So through the Tongs. So there were some people who were dealing in heroin who weren't even gang members.
Right.
They weren't even associated with the gang members. Right. Okay, that's how much heroin is coming in.
Wow.
Johnny Eng from the Flying Dragons. You got Fu Zhao from the Fuk Ching. Eventually, he became the leader of the Green Dragons. He branched off. These two made it big with the drug business, and also Dice from the Dongwon. He was like the founder of the Dongwon gang. That he was before Clifford Wong. These three guys made it really big in the drug business. Yeah. So the heroin was coming in, and the Flying Dragons were dealing with the Puerto Ricans. They were supplying Boy George. Right. If you ever heard of Boy George.
Of course. We talk about him in the show all the time. Puerto Rican, young heroin kingpin from the South Bronx.
Chinatown has a lot of respect for this guy, Boy George. The story behind that is he was getting the heroin from the Flying Dragons. What happened is, if you listen to some of the interviews that I posted on my channel, Chinatown Gang Stories, I interviewed Cowboy. Cowboy was known to Boy George crew as Fried Rice. He was the supplier. What happened was, originally he wasn't supplying Boy George. He was supplying another Puerto Rican kid. But as the numbers got bigger and the quantity got bigger, that kid couldn't handle it. So passed on the contact to Boy George, and that's how him and Cowboy got connected. So they were doing business, brick here, brick there. Eventually, there was a time when they had a dry period where the heroin wasn't coming in for whatever reason. But they had the customer base, so they now had to look for another source. And they found the Colombians who had their version of their heroin, not the China White. And there was a transaction that was supposed to be made. So Boy George and Cowboy went to do the transaction. While they were waiting in the car, The person went inside the building. They thought it was just one way in and one way out. They didn't know there was a hidden passage behind to leave. So what happened was they got beat for that money. Okay, they got beat for that money, and there was a lot of money back then, $200,000. And there was some tension between those two at the time. Like, okay, so who's going to be responsible? It was Boy George contact. Right, so now Cowboy got beat of the money. Boy George got beat of his money. After they got beat, Boy George came down with his crew to Chinatown and met up with Cowboy and told him that he'll be responsible for that money. And he lived up to it. He owned up to it.
And
So ever since then, when the Flying Dragons got their shipment back of the China White, they were giving it to Boy George on consignment.
and each of these,
And you're talking about big numbers. You're talking about like 5-10 bricks at a clip on consignment.
yeah,
Because now,
on credit.
yeah. So that's how Boy George gets so big.
Right. And one of those, and the China White was the best heroin. It's better than the Colombian heroin. And each kilo wholesale was could be worth $100,000. So breaking it
remember-
down, man, you make like $1 million on a brick.
I remember I was able to get it for around, I was like probably like the last. So, I mean, I wasn't no high ranking gang member. I was able to get it for around 80,000, 70,000 around there. I'm thinking those gang members were probably picking up for like maybe 60,000. And if they go overseas in Hong Kong, I think when it lands in Hong Kong, it was somewhere around the 10,000 range. But Hong Kong had a big demand for cocaine at that time, for coke. So some of the gang members were trading it, coke for heroin, but they were making so much more money with the heroin.
Right.
Cocaine in Hong Kong, and they're selling for a lot more than what they were selling for the U.S.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. That was that was when Hong Kong was still free.
Yes.
It was not under the CCP like it
Yes.
is now.
Yes.
So the route for China White heroin was Burma to Hong Kong, and it sounds like in Hong Kong is where the deals were made
Probably
with.
Burma to Thailand, maybe,
Uh-huh.
around there. And then from Hong Kong, it comes to the U.S.
And so the gangs, either the Tong associations or the street gangs in Chinatown, are making the deals in Hong Kong, either with connects that they know, family, whoever, and they set up the shipments to the U.S.
Yes. Wow. A lot of the triad members were involved, so they would fly over, meet up with the gang members.
And can you explain to people, everybody's heard of triad gang members, but when you say triads, what do you mean exactly by that?
Triad is just like another gang, but they're based overseas. Like you have the Sun Yeon triad, then you have the 14K triad. They're based in Hong Kong, but they have their factions all over the world.
Right.
Then you have the bamboo triad in Taiwan. So many different triads.
Right.
You have the Gong Lok triad, which is in Canada. There's a lot of different triads. They're more international based,
Right.
with different factions. But when you're talking about the gangs, the Chinese gangs, right? You're talking about like the Gold Shadow Flying Dragons and Dongwon. Back in those days, it was 3 gangs that control 1 or 2 blocks in New York City's Chinatown. And then you have the Tongs, which is the association, which is the connection to the triads and the gangs. So whenever the triad need to hook up with the gangs, right, they would look for the Tong members to do that connection, the meeting,
Right.
put us together.
Right.
So you have the triads, you have the Tongs, and then you have the gangs. Wow. And people think that is one of the same, but it's not.
So the triads were almost like the drug cartels, and the Tong associations were the middlemen, and the Chinatown street gangs were the customers receiving the product.
They're like the
buyers.
enforcer, more like the enforcer and the gangs. It's just a typical gang, just like any street gang, but it's just more organized, structured, than the regular gangs you have in the streets because they have the connections overseas.
Today's episode is sponsored by my favorite online dispensary, Bay Smokes. Based out of Miami, Florida, this is the country's #1 online dispensary with everything you need shipped safely and federally legal to your door. Whatever it is, flour, pre-rolls, gummies, vapes, Bay Smokes has you covered. Especially if you're like me, you live in states like Texas that are rolling back all of the progress we made on these cannabis laws. You can just go online and shop legally with Bay Smokes. Check it out. We've got an offer for you. Link in the description of this episode and in the comment gives you 3.5 free grams. What? 3.5 free. Why would you not go do that? Even if you don't use the stuff, go and get it anyways and use that promo code. Use the promo code that we put in there. Bay Smokes, the coolest brand, the best products, the nicest people, and totally and completely federally legal. Thank you so much, Bay Smokes, for sponsoring the show. And again, go get that freebie. Use the link that I put in the description right there. Tell them we sent you. All right, let's get back into the episode.
Now, was any heroin sold retail in Chinatown, or was it just simply supplying drug dealers from other neighborhoods?
I don't know of any Chinese gang member that use heroin. They know what it can do. They'll use coke, but heroin, they stay away from that.
All right.
Maybe the BTK. Some of them use heroin, but the Chinese gang members, like the Flying Dragons, Ghost Shadows, no.
So they didn't allow any like...
No, it's not that they don't allow it. They know what it can do to you.
But in Chinatown, there were not any trap spots, any blocks selling to junkies.
Retail. No, not
That's
retail.
what I mean.
No, they don't deal in retail like that. The Chinese.
Yeah.
The Chinese don't deal in the retail, and
Smart.
they don't deal like that.
Okay, so
Back then, there was a lot of shootings and a lot of killings. Over drug money. I mean, people nowadays, they're not gonna understand. They're gonna think, oh, Chinatown was like that. Yeah, look in the newspaper, right? Look at all the shootings, and that's just the ones that they covered. Imagine, right, how many shootings there were, because the news don't cover everything. And if you look back then, there's so many articles about it in Chinatown, a lot of killings. A lot of them, just imagine how many killings and shootings there were. Right? If you look at, during that era, there was about maybe 38 open cases, cold cases, homicide, unsolved. So that'll give you an idea of what was going on in Chinatown. And that's just in the confines of the 5th precinct in Chinatown. Then you have the gang members killing people outside of Chinatown. And that's unsolved. Even the precinct where I worked, 6-6 precinct, there was a homicide. I think it was a double homicide on Ocean Parkway and Church Avenue. They killed an associate of the Ghost Shadows back then in the Lincoln. He died inside the Lincoln. And that's unsolved. So how many unsolved cases are there? A lot.
All right. So you're a 5th grade, 6th grade, young ABC Chinese guy, but you barely speak any English. And how do you fall into the street? Take us through your journey up and until you become a cop. All that's so fascinating. Just take us through how you started getting deeper and deeper into the streets.
So I went to elementary school in Brooklyn, and I was the only Asian kid in my class. Throughout all those years, it was like I was like the only Asian kid. So of course, picture this: in the 70s, 80s, the teachers, they really didn't have that type of training to identify bullying, or maybe they took a blind eye to it. Who knows? But it was it was bad. You know, I didn't have good memories back then. Growing up as a kid in public school, you know, getting bullied. You know, you got kids calling me communist. I didn't even know what communist. How did kids know what communist mean? I'm like, what does that mean? You know, like back then, I'm like in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, they call me a communist. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, how do kids know what communist mean? And you know, they'll pull back their eyes and they'll make some Chinese undertone. You know, there's all kinds of.
Yeah.
It's just I just have to deal with that all the time. You know?
Right.
And I wasn't a big kid. I was a small kid. You know, and it's just not easy for me to talk about. You know, how the type of bullying I went through. It's easier for me to write about it. You know, so it's in my book. You know, you can read it. It's Bad to Blue. And then later on, the bullying gets worse. It doesn't get any better. You know, just imagine like you from 3rd grade up until the 6th grade. Okay. And now I go to junior high school, which is called middle school now, right? It gets worse, you know. And then later on, high school. It just progresses, the bullying. You know, I guess kids are kids, you know.
Yeah.
Then get into fights and that, and everything. And then later on, I see this kid. He's a Cambodian kid. You know, call him Cambodian Peter in my book. Back then, in the 80s, if you see him, he had all the telltale signs of a gang member, okay? I see him all the time, and generally he's either alone or he's with his friend, I'll call Big Chicken. But most of the time he's alone. And me and this white kid, my study partner, after school, we would go play some video games in the pool hall. Before we go home. And I would see this kid, Cambodian Peter, in the pool hall by himself, you know. The way he carried himself, his demeanor, the way he dressed, like, caught my attention. Like, you know, this guy is by himself. Doesn't seem like he has any fear of being picked on. And you know, the shady characters that hang out in the pool hall. You have all different races, but he was by himself, you know, and he wasn't afraid of showing his tattoos. All right. Because unlike now, if you see an Asian kid with a tattoo, it's a fashion statement. Back then in the 80s, if you weren't a gang member, you better not have a tattoo. Okay. Times are different now. You have a tattoo back then, you're gonna get stepped up. You're getting stepped up to.
Yeah.
If you have a tattoo back in those days and you're Chinese, you're getting stepped up. We're gonna want to know who you follow, where you're from, what gang you're with. All right. Unlike nowadays, I think that all ended during that time when the tribal tattoos came out. Okay. Remember those tribal tattoos? There was probably that was like in the 90s. It all ended at that time because it became more like a fashion statement. You know. So before that, no, you better not have a tattoo, and if you show it, you're gonna get stepped up to. So Cambodian Peter was there, and I guess I got attracted to that. How he was, that type of life. I was fascinated, you know. So because I was bullied. Yeah. So of course, you know, like what are my options? You know, like to stop the bullying. You know, like it wasn't a good feeling. You know, and I didn't want to be at the bottom of the totem pole now. You know, I wanted to like have some protection. That's right. Sort of. You know, some power, and that's what attracted me to this guy. And I didn't think I was gonna I wasn't actively looking to join the gang. No. You know, I just noticed him and that's it. And I went on my way, and one day I was walking alone to the pool hall called Triangles in Brooklyn to meet up with my friend. And he was happened to be walking the same way. And he asked me if I'm going to the pool hall because he's seen me around with my white friend playing video games. And that's how we connected. Yeah, I'm walking. Yeah, I'm going over there too. So during that walk, we became friends. And then if you read my book, it'll tell you how I got accepted by him. And then later on, I found out that he was in Brooklyn to do recruiting. He had the rank of a daima. So he was there to do recruiting for his dailo.
Can you tell us what a dailo is?
A dailo, if you translate dailo in Chinese, is big brother. Mm. So you refer to anyone above your rank as a dailo. Nobody's going to call themselves a daima. A daima is one rank above a soldier, a street soldier. Then you have above the daima, which is the recruiter, or the person who have a handful of soldiers under him. Mm. The person above the daima is ranked as a dailo. But we, for example, a street soldier would not call a daima. They'll call that person a dailo. It's out of respect. You always call a person above you a dailo. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you would never hear the term in the streets, oh, he's a daima. Yeah.
So after a dailo above that, is that a boss level?
So so you got the street soldier, mm-hmm. You have the daima, and then you have the dailo, and then above the dailo, you will have the boss. Mm. And that boss under him could have, some gangs could have 3, 4, 5, 6 dailo. Mm-hmm. But only one boss. Right. And that boss is the person who's connected to the tongs.
Right.
And whenever the tongs need to deal with something, the tongs will look for the boss, right, so to speak. And he's also known as the dailo. Mm. Yeah,
so the boss would look at his dailos almost like lieutenants.
Sort of like, captains.
Captains.
Yeah, so you have 5 or 6 captains out there, and those captains will get their best guys to do recruiting, and those people will be sort of daima, mm-hmm. meaning daima, if you translate it into Chinese, is more like ma means horse, dai means like you're herding, like a horse herder. So maybe that's where it came from. Like you're herding a bunch of horse, so which is supposed to mean the soldiers that you have by you. So that's why we don't say, oh, he's my daima. No, we say he's my dailo. Right. We always give the respect of the rank above us, the term dailo.
Okay. So this is very much set up like an Italian mafia structure. Boss, very captain, similar. Lieutenant, soldier, maybe something even lower than a soldier, a new recruit. And so did you come in as a foot soldier, a street soldier?
More like an associate.
Okay.
Like someone who would just hang around the gangs.
Right.
I would say the soldier is later on when you get initiated. I believe it was either 89 or 90, I got initiated and went through the whole ceremony with the General Kwan and, the wine and the incense.
Wow.
So I went through that.
Wow.
That was later on.
What did you have to do to prove yourself as an associate?
It's not like the Italians where you're going to put in work or whatever. And then, okay, you put in work and then you're going to be a made man. Mm. It goes according to your dailo. They see potential in you. You're making money. You're carrying yourself, on your own, and you've been with the gang for so long, and they have an eye for it. Mm-hmm. I mean, to be a dailo, you're gonna have to have an eye for certain people. You're gonna know who's who. Who has the potential to rat, who has the potential to jump from one gang to another. So they see me as someone who's loyal, not a threat to them. making money, carry my own. So it's all these factors come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask me to do anything, they think I'm going to get it done, you know? So.
You were already earning at this time?
Oh yeah. By that time, at that time I had my car service business. Okay. I had my own car service business. It was called On-Time Car Service. And yeah, I was making money with that. I built it up from a 2-car business into a 12-car operation.
Wow.
So I had my car service running at the time.
Okay.
And they were holding meetings in my office. In my office, they were holding meetings, where to do the certain home invasions and whatnot. So,
wow.
And some of the deals, counterfeit money, gun deals, that was like a meeting place.
Wow.
We'll do the walk talks outside, but we'll meet up in my office.
Yeah. And
then we'll go out and we'll put deals together.
What kind of guns were these gangs carrying around back then?
They love the guns. The Chinese people, they love 9mm Glock. Not only Glock, but I think the best one is the Smith & Wesson. That was the best seller because they used that in the movie The Killer with Chow Yun-fat, and also the Hard Boiled, A Better Tomorrow. Like the guns that the Chow Yun-fat used, the 9mm. They love that. But revolvers, you can't get enough of that. They love revolvers because you don't leave nothing behind.
Right.
You don't leave anything behind.
They don't jam.
Nope, they don't jam, and a lot of the people, they don't know how to clean their gun. I didn't know that until I became a cop. That's why if you're gonna get into a gun battle with a cop and you're a gang member, more than likely the cop's gonna win because they go to training. And they keep their gun clean. Meanwhile, a lot of the people from the streets, they don't know how to take apart a gun. I could take apart my gun in a couple of seconds into a couple of pieces. And then they don't know how to take the dirt out. You get dust balls in there. So it jams on them.
Right.
And that's why, like the Chinese, they love the revolvers. They love it.
A lot of the hits, were they carried out as because the streets of Chinatown are so dense. There's so many people just stacked on top of each other like rats. A lot of these hits, were they walk-bys? People walking up to you, shooting you, and then running off? Were they drive-bys? Like, how do you plan a hit in Chinatown?
There's no drive-by. Once in a while, there's a drive-by. Once in a while. But there's so much traffic in Chinatown. It's not like...
Right.
You can't even imagine how much traffic in Chinatown. You can't do a drive-by there. No. But once in a while, I know a couple of I know of one drive-by I can't even talk about. But mostly they'll do a hit anyway. They don't care. Wow. You could be right next to the precinct. They don't care. Yeah. They'll do a hit. Yeah. Look at Nicky Louie. Precinct's right across the street. Look at, he got shot. Warhop, right? The case with the battle between the Ghost Shadows and the Eagles, Wintermelon, I believe, with Kid's Ice Crew. Saw 2 eagles inside Warhop, grabbed one of them out, put him on his knees, capped him right there in a busy street, wow. right in the middle of the afternoon. Then went inside, took the other one out, and capped him. Killed 2 people right in the busy street. Imagine how busy Chinatown was, how crowded it was. Yeah. They don't care. You know why? Because everyone's afraid of the gangs back then. Who's gonna rat them out?
So when you finally become a made man, tell us about the gang. Tell us about the association that you were with.
I was with the Fuk Ching gang. And during that time, Fuk Ching was a new gang. Nobody ever heard of the Fuk Ching. It was during the early days. It was during the 80s. And that's when they first tried to make a name for themselves. Right? The established gangs were the Flying Dragons, Dong, and the Ghost Shadows. And then you had the White Tigers in Queens. So Fuk Ching, nobody heard of. So when my daima told me that, he was in the Fuk Ching gang, I'm like, I never heard of Fuk Ching. Fuk Ching was predominantly at the top level, is almost all Fujianese. They were the new immigrants coming into this country. Yeah, and they didn't fit in with the Cantonese. So the people at the lower level, like me and the soldiers and the daima, right, they were doing all the dirty work. Because the Fujianese, they weren't too familiar with Chinatown. They were still trying to feel everything out during that time. That's when they first started immigrating to the U.S. and they started taking over. More and more of them started coming in to the territory, and they started moving into East Broadway. And that's how they got into the war with the Dong gang. And you can ask Big Head about that. So the dirty work was done. Most of the things that made the newspaper was from our crew that hit the papers. So basically, whatever our crew did enhanced their reputation, the people at the top. I mean, they made some headlines also. AK and, his thing with Sister Ping. But a lot of like the low-level crimes, it came from our crew and different factions of our crew as well. So they weren't Fujianese. They were like Cambodian, Vietnamese, ABC. We had Cantonese, Taiwanese, all different various ethnic background.
Wow.
Even Laotian, So
wow. How did, when you got in, did you see your money improve? Like, what was the benefit to you economically from joining up with the gang?
Oh, in the beginning, the Dailo would take care of the food, the apartment that we live in. The money trickles down. So the Dailo meaning Cambodian Peter's boss. Okay, so I guess the boss at the top would give him money, and he would take care of us by giving Cambodian Peter money, and he would take care of us by taking us out to eat, shoot pool. Back then, roller skating was a thing. Take us to clubs like that. Eventually, we would branch off on our own and do street robberies. We were kids. We were young. 15, 16-year-old. Some of the gang members are 14, doing street robberies, extortion, small money.
Yep.
Then later on, as I got older, through the connection, I was dealing with other things, like getting guns. So I was getting marijuana, getting counterfeit money, different things like that. So as I got older, then we moved away from the street robberies. Right. And then as I got older, in my 20s, then I started opening my own business. So I had 3 retail stores. I had the car service business, and then I had the pool hall at the junction. And that opened the doors for other opportunities, because right there in the heart of Flatbush, I had access to more business. I was selling the bootleg tapes, and I was getting the marijuana from the Jamaicans. I was getting the handguns from the American blacks. So that opened the door for other business opportunities for me. And I was getting counterfeit money from an Israeli, and also from my Dailo's boss. So
can you tell us about counterfeit money? How do you make money out of?
I don't know how they make the money, but
how do you make money out of buying and selling counterfeit money?
Oh, that's in my book.
Tease it for us. This is fascinating.
Okay, buying it is not a problem. getting rid of it is a problem, especially in bulk. You know, like, well, I'm going to spend $100 here and there. No, I want to spend a big chunk of it and be able to convert whatever into real money. So check it out in my book.
How much does it cost?
It depends on the quality. It depends, like 30 cents on the dollar for some, 50 cents on the dollar for a high quality $100 bill with the threads.
Right.
So it depends.
Right. And if you can get a good batch,
Yeah.
you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
What about the heroin? When did that come into play?
Oh, that I had access to it. I remember I had access in '89 to heroin in 1989. I turned that down right away.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I'm not gonna get involved with something like that. It's because what went through my mind when I was offered, I was thinking, you know, especially like during that time, the war on drugs, you're getting, you know, big numbers if you get caught with heroin, dealing with heroin. You know, you kill somebody, you don't get that kind of jail time, prison time.
Right. Did the bosses of the Chinese gangs, did they have a policy against dealing heroin, like the Italians said they did, even though in practice they didn't?
The Chinese?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so you
It's
could
up to the individual.
Oh, I see.
You know, nobody's gonna say no, you can't deal in heroin. But I thought in my mind, I'm like, you know what? If I ever get stopped by the cops with heroin, like in my mind, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna shoot it out with the cops. You know. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to make that kind of decision, especially, you know, in those days. You know, the prison time was heavy. So I'm like, okay, go to prison or shoot out with the cops. I didn't want to make a decision like that. You know, like you can cap somebody and you won't even get that kind of prison time. You could claim self-defense or you could claim, you know, whatever, or manslaughter, you know, anything but murder. You get a good lawyer. But with heroin, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. Were a lot of Chinese gang members going to prison?
Yeah. When the FBI came down, took them all out.
When you make money you're a member of an organization, you're a made man, say this guy's into guns, this guy's into counterfeit money, this guy's into weed, whatever. Do you then have to kick a percentage of your profits up to the boss, or how does that work? How does the collection of money work?
No, I don't have to kick it up. See, it's different with the Chinese gangs.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, they get their reputation on me. Oh, you're Tai Lo. You got this guy in your crew. Oh, he built a reputation. It's all about the reputation of the gang. I don't have to kick it up, but I take care of my guys under me.
Yeah.
You know, everything they eat, whatever, it's on me. You know.
That's fascinating. It's complete opposite in Italian organizations. Yeah. Italians, everything moves to the top. The soldier pays for dinner. The boss never touches his wallet. The Chinese culture is very much more communal, I think.
Yeah, you know why? Because you want the cream of the crop. You want the best in your crew. You know, you want the people who is able to make it independently in your crew. You want the best, just like Julius Caesar, right? You know, he takes care of his legions.
That's right.
Right, and he gets the loyalty from them.
Right.
So the Tai Lo takes care of us. He gets the loyalty from us.
Yeah.
You know, it's how it's like a big brother thing. You know, just like the Italians, right? It's different because we're kids. We're early teens, right? To like early 20s. We're kids. You know, and we're basically like living together in an apartment, like sometimes like 10, 15 to an apartment where the Tai Lo would secure us a place.
Wow.
You know? So that brotherhood is built, you know, through being together all that time in a place where we live together. Unlike the other ethnic groups, right? If you like the BTK, there would be a whole crew. living together in an apartment. It could be like 10 of them.
Wow.
They're living together. That's the brotherhood. They don't have parents, right? Some of these guys that I was with, they didn't have any parents. They had nothing. If you look at the timeline, that was during the time of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. That was during the time of the Vietnam War. You know how many families were disrupted? These kids came over with nothing.
They were like orphans.
Yes. Yeah, they came over with nothing. They came from a orphanage.
Yeah.
A plane flew them here, and then people from the church sponsored them or whatever. And then next thing you know, they're abandoned. They're in the streets. So they have nothing. Wow. And then that's why you don't, like, rarely you get them to rat. Mm-hmm. Because they don't have anything. All they have is the brotherhood.
Right.
That's why the Canal Boys, later known as the BTK, so many people were following David Dai, the leader of the BTK. Right? And that's the same thing with the Chinese. You know, the gang members were dirt poor back then. Right. Now you see a Chinese person, they got money. No, it wasn't like that for them back then.
How far did you have ambitions to become a boss or a captain when you eventually joined up with the gang?
I had zero ambition to be anything above a street soldier. So when you call me a made man, no, I don't consider myself a made man. A street soldier. And that's all I was, and that's all I ever wanted to be, just to be part of this brotherhood, this organization. Okay. I never aspired to be anything bigger than my boss, but my boss always took my advice, and even my boss's boss even respected my advice and certain views.
What kind of advice would you give?
Depends. Sometimes, for example, we went on a revenge shooting for something that happened to one of our guys. He got stabbed, and then we went to hunt them down. So I would tell them, like, when we have the meeting, I would say, okay, we'll split up into like 2 crews, and one crew go here, one crew go there. And the planning stage, he would listen to what I say, like he would take my advice. Okay, so this crew likes to hang out in this location, and sometimes they'll hang out in that location. And then we'll split up into 2 crews, and we'll take which guns to use, and they take my advice. So that's like certain advice, like planning. When it comes to planning, he'll take my advice. And like for example, like my Dai Mas, Dai Lo, he has access to a lot of things. Even a grenade. Wow. Yeah, a military style grenade at that time, I remember. And he was selling for like $2,500 for one grenade. Wow. I don't know how he got it. Wow. But I think he had 1 or 2 available to sell at the time. And then I was going to sell it to the Italians. And he trusted me enough to put that deal together. So they respected me.
Were there any grenade attacks in the Chinatown gang wars, or firebombing or anything like that?
It made the news. The BTK bombed the police van. Yeah.
Say that again?
The BTK
bombed.
The Vietnamese, they bombed the police van. Wow. The 5th Precinct police van, they bombed it. It's because they were raiding the place, and I believe they took all their fireworks during that time. And they weren't too happy with it, the cops. But they were wild. They didn't follow the unwritten street rules that the Chinese had back then. Something that the Chinese and the Italians wouldn't do. But the Vietnamese, remember, it was a whole different level of violence with them. Because, like I said, they came from
the war,
Vietnam, refugees, and also with the Cambodians during that time. It was like, you're talking about, it's totally different. These kids grew up quick, let's put it that way. Yeah. You get a 14, 15-year-old Vietnamese kid, they're survivors. You know, if you take them compared to a 19, 20-year-old Chinese kid or Italian kid, you know, it was different. Different back then. Now, we're living in a different world now. But
That's
back
obvious.
back then, they took violence to a whole new level. I mean, the shooting that they did with the Dong, like, it was over like 30-something shots fired, you know, in front of the gambling house on East Broadway. Then you had the shooting in the cemetery where over 100 shots were fired between the Ghost Shadows and the BTK. Wow. It made the papers. I mean, that's the level of violence that was happening back then.
Wow. So you're in the gang and you're earning. What happens next?
What do you mean? What happened? No.
Tell us how, you know, lead us through basically when the feds came down in 92, hit everybody, and then eventually what led you to become a cop?
The feds came down on and Sister Ping to the humans, people smuggling, the snakehead business that they were doing.
Oh yeah, tell us about the snakehead business. That's wild.
Snakehead?
So gross.
Yeah, they call them snakehead because of what they have their contacts in China.
Yeah.
They make a deal with the person in China to smuggle them over into the U.S. And when they smuggle them over, they'll pay when they get here because they're so poor.
Hang on, but
they don't have any
tell us
money.
about the snakehead business, like
People
actual
smuggling.
Okay, got it.
If you're in China and you're poor and you have nothing going on there for you and you take any risk just to come over here to get a job and send money home to your family, you're going to go to a snakehead. A snakehead is the middle person who has contact with the people in the U.S. in Chinatown to smuggle you here.
Got it.
So now, if they're so poor that they don't have money to pay, so they're going to have to work it off.
Right.
So who's going to make sure that they're going to work and paying their payment, right? So they come over here, and Sister Ping and Ake, which is the Fuk Ching's Dailo, the big boss, was running that operation. Wow. And when the feds cracked down, they took down the whole crew.
How much would it cost to be smuggled over here? Like, what is that? If you don't have any money and you become like an indentured servant, how much would that cost, like a Chinese immigrant?
At that time, it was somewhere around 30,000.
Wow.
At that time.
Huge money.
Yeah, at that time.
So that was a multi-million dollar a year racket for some of these gangs.
Yeah, so they'll make the deal. Say, okay, we're gonna get you here. You're gonna pay 30,000. Yeah, okay. So now they bring them here, and now they work in the kitchen. Oh, they don't feel like working no more. Oh, this is too hard. I don't want to work. Then what happens? Are they gonna get beat for that 30,000? You know, no. They're gonna find somebody beat the shit out of you.
Right.
You know, or kill you, or your family in China. Wow. So most of the time, that don't happen.
Right.
Because they know what they're in for. Right? It's like you're borrowing money from me. You're gonna pay me. Right?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's like it's the Chinese version of like what the coyotes who work for the Mexican cartels do, smuggling people in from Mexico.
But don't forget, the Fuk Ching had different factions, different Dailos. Had so many Dailos. So my Dailo didn't deal with that part of the business.
Right.
You know.
What was your Dailo's main racket?
Gambling. So that's why our crew avoided all the federal scrutiny, because my Dailo made most of his money through gambling. Yeah. He had gambling houses all over. Yeah. He had one near Main Street in Queens, Chinatown, some in Brooklyn, some in New York City's Chinatown. And one of his customers was Sister Ping's relative. Bring hundreds of thousands, and just drop it in the night, and next day he'll come back, pay off the loan and gamble again.
Wow.
So that's his main racket. That's why he didn't even need to get involved with the heroin business. So our crew was shielded from that too. Wow. We had access to it if we wanted, but he personally didn't dabble in that.
Wow.
You know, he said one day the boss called him in, and he went into the office, and there were maybe about 6, 7, 8 bricks of heroin there, whatever. And he told my dialogue, help me move it. Then he goes, with all due respect, boss, if you ask me to go kill somebody for you, consider it taken care of. But please don't ask me to do this, because this is going to kill a lot of innocent people, harm a lot of innocent lives. So, but if you ask me to do a hit, I'll take care of it. So he was okay with that answer.
Right.
So that's why our crew never got involved with that heroin business.
Right. So then the big bust in '92 happens, and Sister Ping and the Snakehead operation gets busted and goes down. Who else went down?
His inner circle. My case, inner circle. Don't forget, we were a different faction. We were one of the faction of the Fuk Ching, and we were doing all the low-level crimes that was hitting the papers, right? The shootings and the killings and the gang war, the beatings, the extortion, the robberies. If you read in the papers, the jewelry store robbery, the 3 BTK that was executed in the parking lot of the bar. Like, we made headlines. Like, we made all these headlines, and the shooting of the white kid near Kings Highway in Brooklyn. Like, we were making headlines, and it benefited the boss.
Yeah.
Because people were like, damn, the Fuk Ching is wild.
Right.
You know? So it benefited him. But he shielded us from his money-making operation with the Snakehead business and all. So his money was trickling down to his captains, which trickled down to our boss Daima, and then to us. Right. So that's where the money would, that's how he gets the loyalty of the gang members. But then the captains and the Daima would pick and choose who they spend the money on, and that's why some of the people left the gang and joined another gang. So that's why back then there were a lot of people jumping from one gang to another.
Right.
You know, but they always liked me, so I stuck with them because I made money on my own.
Right. Right. How did that evolve and into the 90s? How long did that go for?
Oh, once there's so many things happening in the 90s, you know, especially with the innocent tourists that got shot and killed, and then the bombing of the police van by the BTK, and then the feds eventually dropped the hammer on the Tong gang, Flying Dragons, and then the Fuk Ching.
Right.
The writing was on the wall.
Right.
And this is the end of the Asian gangs as we know it.
Wow.
You're never going to hear about them ever again.
Wow.
You know, it's like, and nobody ever spoke about them because they had such a tight grip on the community and the residents of Chinatown.
Right.
That even to this day, they're afraid to even mention their names and even talk about them. So it's that people your age, the kids, they will hear whispers from their parents or their grandparents, but they're not going to get the whole story because the fear is still embedded in them.
Wow.
That's the type of, you know, they think that we're still active. We're not. It's over.
So there's old Chinese people in Chinatown that remember those days vividly and still remember who the Flying Dragons were and the BTK. That's incredible.
Ask anyone who lived in Chinatown around my age or older, they know.
Wow.
They will know.
And
but none of them ever spoke about it, and that's why I came forward.
I see.
And took this step to write a book.
So when did you get out of the game? What year?
It was towards the end, around 94, 95. Yeah.
And why?
95. There's a number of reasons why. You know, a number of reasons why. One thing that stuck to my head, that's always on my mind, was this police officer. His name is Stephen McDonald, and he was shot by a teenage kid, and left him a quadriplegic. I followed his story because I was reading the newspaper every day to keep track of, see if any of my guys or the other gang members made the papers or whatever. So I'm reading the newspaper every day whenever I'm at the office or at my store, and I follow the story. And during that time, when I guess it was going to trial, it was being covered in the media all the time, he forgave the kid who shot him. When he forgave the kid who shot him, it left me like wondering, like, why would he forgive him? Right? After what he did to you, how can you forgive someone like that? And he made a statement on why he forgave him, and saying that the kid was a product of his environment. And I was a young kid at that time. I didn't understand what that statement meant. So I'm like thinking in my mind, like, what does he mean by that? So I started questioning my own beliefs, because the way I grew up, if you look at the Shaw Brother movies, and that's what I grew up with, everything is about revenge.
Right.
Okay. And it didn't fit with my way of thinking and the life I was living and the people I was around. And I started questioning my own beliefs. Like, am I a product of my environment? I mean, that was the first time I ever heard that term. And I was too young to understand, but it's just that statement stuck in my mind. And after all those years, I keep thinking, like, I need to get out of this environment in order to make that change. Right? So in order for anyone to make a change, you need to realize you're making a mistake or you're doing something wrong. If you don't realize it, you never take that step to make that change. So it was always in my mind, like, how do I get out? Right? So I couldn't find the answer. Like, I was so engrossed in that life, like, I didn't know how to get out. So Stephen McDonald gave me, I guess, planted a seed. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe I'll take the police test. And so I took the police test, and maybe that'll be a way out, you know? And I was so close into joining the military, right? Just to get out of that life.
Wow.
But then the police department called me. They sent me a letter, and that's what stopped me from bailing out and going to the military.
Mm-hmm.
So
you got out of the gang by becoming a cop. That's crazy. That's so ironic.
I guess the timing was right, because at that time, everybody was locked up, dead, or in prison.
Right.
Or trying to find ways to make a living.
Right.
The legitimate way.
Yeah.
You know, some of these gang members, they opened their own business. Some of them just got a regular job.
Right.
And it was over. You know, once the feds get you, that's it. What are you going to continue? You're going to continue and say, oh, I'm a Fuk Ching member, I'm a Ghost Shadow member?
Right.
It's over.
Wow. And you didn't have a police record? You didn't have a criminal record?
Came so close to getting arrested.
Yeah.
But I never got arrested.
Wow.
So on paper, what do you see?
You beat the odds, man.
Yeah.
Was your name in a file anywhere from being associated with any of these guys?
Probably had my picture in the 5th precinct, or maybe the 6-1 precinct, or maybe the 7-2 precinct. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of back then, the plainclothes cops, you know, they would take pictures of the gang members in the streets.
And then where did you serve as a cop?
I served as a cop in the 6-6 precinct, and it covers Brooklyn's Chinatown.
So you're policing the same streets you used to make money out of?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were a cop. I mean, and that's the story, man. And now you're retired.
Now I'm retired.
Now, is that why you chose to write the book after you retired, or why now are you coming out? You know, in the recent years, why have you chosen to come out with all these stories? Why not earlier?
I decided to come out with this book in 2015. In 2015, I hit my 20th year in the police department, and I was able to retire and come out with this book. The reason why is because nobody ever told this story. Nobody. So I wanted to like basically set the record straight. Like, okay, this is what happened, and this is what the type of mistakes that they made in the media about the Chinese gangs. In my book and some of the interviews on YouTube, it points out all the mistakes that was made in the newspaper. Okay, and there's plenty more coming on my channel that I haven't spoke about yet because I haven't had time. This book was supposed to come out around 2015, but I decided not to retire until 2021. I just hung in there. Something happened, in the middle of that, around 2019, which postponed my retirement. And so I wanted to give my perspective of what happened, because everything that was written about the Asian gangs came from a non-Asian or someone who interviewed those gang members.
Right.
So it didn't come from the horse's mouth.
That's right.
Right. So I see both sides of it. I see the law enforcement side, and I see the side of the gang members. So I want to bring that story out.
Fascinating. And Chinatown Gang Stories is a great YouTube channel. It's a great Instagram, TikTok follow. I catch your videos all the time. Really, really well done. But let's plug your book. This is where people can get everything that we've talked about, which is fascinating. The underworld, the Chinese underworld that is so secretive by your guys' nature. The stories that you told, you go into far greater detail in the book. Tell people the name of it and where they can get it. We'll have a link to the book in the description of the episode.
Yeah, sometimes people call the Chinese gangs the Chinese Mafia. The Mafia, that term applies to the Italians, right?
I don't know, man. You guys ran it pretty similar. You guys had the structure, the same rackets, pretty much. It sounds like a mafia to me. And I'm sure that the feds applied the same RICO cases to take down the bosses that they would have with the wise guys.
Yeah, they went after the Italians first. And once they're done with the Italians, then they came after the Chinese.
Yep.
And we have a lot of respect for the Italians. A lot. I mean, my mentor was Italian. Even Kid Jai's godfather was Italian, and he was the leader of the Ghost Shadows. But it's just like the old Italians, the mob guys, they're really cool stand-up guys. It's just the young Italian kids that we were at war with in those times. It's like they're so immature for their age. Like you're dealing with like these teenagers, 17, 18, 19-year-old teenage Italian kids. They're troublemakers,
Yeah, they're Italians. What do you want?
They go home to their mom and dad, but meanwhile, you're dealing with these guys who came from this third world country, who has nothing to lose, and they don't go home to their mom and dad. They don't have a mom and dad to go. They live in an apartment supplied by the Dailo. So you're dealing with a different level of violence. It's just the young Italian kids. They're not out there to make money like the older Italian mob guys. They're out there to make trouble. But meanwhile, these kids are out there to make money, because they're starving.
Yeah.
And like we grew up poor, right? Like I grew up poor. My family was poor. It's nothing. First world country poor is nothing compared to third world country poor, like Cambodian Peter. He was running. Him and his family was running away from the war between the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
They lived in the jungle. They made their way they trekked their way in the jungle all the way to the border of Thailand for 2 years, eating whatever they can find in the jungle or whatever village they pass by that'll help them out. Can some of these kids relate to that now?
Of course
Try to pick up like a worm and eat it, or
right.
And he has no shoes all that time in the jungle for 2 years, only wearing a pair of shorts. No
wonder they weren't scared of prison, man.
No.
Prison in the U.S.? 3 meals a day?
Exactly.
What are you guys complaining about?
They're not complaining. prison. They're not complaining during that time. Now it's different. Yeah. I mean, I remember I arrested this person probably about more than 10 years ago. And I'm for shoplifting. And I'm putting the charge on the report. And, you know, she's very interested in what charge I'm putting on. Is it a felony or a misdemeanor? I told her, you pass that threshold, it's going to be a felony. And she was so happy. It's like, I said, well, why are you so happy? You can charge with a felony. Oh, because I get my 3 meals a day, I get to shower, I get a clean bed to sleep in, right? Instead of being homeless in the homeless shelter, they rather be arrested and
sad, man.
Get fed in there.
Michael, great interview, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, shout the book out and where people can find you on social media and on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe there'll be a part 2.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Take a tour of Chinatown.
Yeah, I would love that. Let's plan on that because it is fascinating. Shout the book out, man. Where can they find it?
Bad to Blue. Bad to Blue. You can order it on Amazon.
Amazon. We'll have the link in the description, and then follow your YouTube page.
Yes. Plenty of interviews over there and plenty more coming.
Chinatown Gang Stories on YouTube, on social media, Instagram. And yeah, look out for a part 2, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, guys.